Good morning and welcome to this thought for the day for Friday. And today our reading is from John chapter 11 and beginning at the first verse. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, a village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it's for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. Then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews tried to stone you, and yet you're going back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees by this world's light. It's when he walks by night that he stumbles, for he has no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, called Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." It's a passage which is full of questions, and then it leads on into Jesus' great statement, "I am the resurrection and the life," and the raising of Lazarus back to life. But since today is St. Thomas's Day, I just want to leave those things on one side and think for a moment about Thomas. There are different tiers of disciples. There are those whom we only know through lists of disciples in the Gospels, like Bartholomew and Simon the Zealot. And then there are the top tier disciples like Peter, James, John. And then there are sort of middle tier disciples like Thomas and Philip and suppose even Judas. Thomas only appears in 3 little cameos which John's Gospel gives us exclusively. There's the one which we just read, there's one from the Last Supper, and then there's the famous resurrection story which gave Thomas his name, Doubting Thomas. I don't know what you think of Thomas, whether you have a rather low opinion of him because of his doubts, or whether you really appreciate him. I couldn't say that he is one of my top favourite disciples, but I do appreciate him a lot, and particularly because of his willingness to speak up the questions that must have been on everybody else's minds, but to vocalise them because he wanted to be clear about things. Of course, that is most clear when he was missing from the resurrection appearance of Jesus and refused to believe until he saw Jesus himself, and his dramatic statement, "Unless I put my fingers in the marks in his hands or put my hand in his side." And the wonderful thing is in the way in which Jesus responds to his questions. In this passage that we read, it's difficult to judge the tone of voice with which Thomas is speaking. "Let us go also that we may die with him." Is it a statement of faith in Jesus and his devotion to Jesus and his loyalty? Or was it issued with a sort of or voice, the voice of the doubter? the voice which said, oh, well, I suppose we'd better go if Jesus is going. Thomas bears examination and study. He asks the questions and Jesus responds to him. And I find that immensely encouraging because it just reminds me that we're not expected to have blind faith, but intelligent faith. And where we've got questions, we're expected to ask them. And where we've got doubts, we're expected to address them. And by that means, can our faith go stronger? So God bless Thomas, and God bless you today.